The sky bled crimson as Garrett Larson rode his chestnut mare into Sweetwater Creek, her dusty boots hardly leaving prints in the hard, packed earth. The Arizona Territory of 1876 was unforgiving, especially to women traveling alone. 3 days without proper food or water had left her dizzy, her once fine dress now tattered and stained. As she stumbled toward the town's only saloon, Garrett had one goal: find work before nightfall or face another night in the merciless desert. The saloon's swinging doors seemed impossibly heavy as she pushed through them. The piano music faltered, and heads turned to stare at the bedraggled woman with tangled auburn hair and haunted green eyes. Garrett straightened her back, summoning what dignity remained after her long journey. "Looking for work," she announced to no one in particular, her voice cracking from thirst. "I can cook clean," so a heavy-set man with greasy hair and a stained apron approached, circling her like a vulture. "Pretty thing like you might have something more suitable." His gaze crawled over her body. Garrett stepped back. "Just honest work, sir." The saloon owner laughed, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Honest work don't pay much, but I know someone who'd take you in." Before Garrett could protest, the man had her by the elbow, steering her toward a table where 3 men hunched over cards. "Hey, Buchanan, got some fresh merchandise for your establishment." The bald man called Buchanan barely looked up. "How much you want for her?" The saloon owner shrugged. $2 should cover it." $2, Buchanan snorted. "She ain't worth more than 1. Look at that hair. Red as sunset, she'll draw customers." Garrett tried to pull away. "I'm not for sale." But her strength, sapped by hunger and exhaustion, was no match for the saloon owner's grip. $2, the owner insisted. "Or I'll take her to Jessup's place instead." "Fine." Buchanan tossed $2 silver onto the table. The transaction was complete before Garrett could fully comprehend what was happening. She had been sold like cattle. 2 days later, Garrett stood in a cramped room at Buchanan's brothel, her new home. She'd refused every customer, endured beatings, and gone without food. But tonight, Buchanan had threatened worse if she didn't cooperate with the next man. The window was small, but Garrett was slender. With trembling hands, she pushed it open and looked down. The 15-foot drop might break her leg, but freedom was worth the risk. She heard heavy footsteps approaching her door. It was now or never. Garrett climbed through the window just as the door swung open. She let herself drop, landing hard on her side with a muffled cry of pain. Above, Buchanan's angry shouts filled the night air. Garrett forced herself to her feet, ignoring the sharp pain in her ankle as she limped toward the stables at the edge of town. She had almost reached them when hoofbeats thundered behind her. Garrett dove into the shadows between 2 buildings, pressing herself against the rough wooden wall, praying they wouldn't find her. The riders passed, but Garrett knew they'd return. She needed to get out of Sweetwater Creek immediately. Slipping into the stables, she spotted a tall, lean man saddling a magnificent black stallion. His back was to her, and he was whistling softly. A cowboy, from the looks of his worn leather chaps and the dusty hat hanging from a nearby hook. He hadn't noticed her yet. Garrett scanned the stables for another horse she might take, but the cowboy's stallion was the only one saddled and ready. She was contemplating her next move when voices outside sent panic coursing through her. "Check the stables," Buchanan called. In desperation, Garrett rushed forward, pressing herself against the cowboy's back and placing a trembling hand over his mouth. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They're looking for me. They sold me for $2. The cowboy tensed but didn't immediately throw her off. He turned slowly in her grip, revealing a handsome face with intense blue eyes and a day's worth of stubble. When their eyes met, something passed between them, a silent understanding. "Then you're worth my whole ranch," he said quietly, his voice deep and steady. Without hesitation, he handed her his hat. "Put this on and tuck your hair inside." Footsteps approached the stable door. The cowboy positioned himself to block her from view, casually adjusting his saddle as Buchanan and one of his men entered. "Evening, gentlemen," the cowboy drawled. "Something I can help you with, looking for a woman," Buchanan said, eyes narrowing suspiciously at the figure behind the cowboy. "Red hair, green eyes, thief and liar," the cowboy chuckled. "Haven't seen anyone fitting that description." He gestured to Garrett without looking back. "This here's my brother Robbie. We're heading back to our spread tonight." Buchanan stepped forward, trying to get a better look at Garrett, who kept her head down, face shadowed by the wide brim of the cowboy's hat. "Mind if I have a word with your brother?" Buchanan asked. "Afraid that won't be possible," the cowboy said, his hand casually moving to rest on the revolver at his hip. "Robbie took a rattler bite last month. Poison affected his throat, can't speak above a whisper now." Buchanan hesitated, clearly weighing his options. "What you say your name was?" "Didn't say." The cowboy smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Name's Ramsey Northwood. Own the Double N about 20 miles west. Perhaps you've heard of it." Recognition flickered across Buchanan's face. The Double N was one of the largest cattle operations in the territory. "Mr. Northwood," Buchanan said, his tone suddenly respectful. "Apologies for the intrusion. We'll leave you to your business." After they left, Ramsey turned to Garrett. "You all right, miss?" Garrett's legs gave out and she sank to the floor, overwhelmed by relief. "Thank you," she managed between shallow breaths. Ramsey crouched beside her. "What's your name?" "Garrett. Garrett Larson." "That's a unique name for a lady." "My father wanted a son," she explained, attempting a smile. "He got me instead." Ramsey nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "Well, Miss Larson, I meant what I said. Anyone who values a human life at $2 deserves to lose everything." He offered his hand. "Let's get you out of here before they come back with reinforcements." Garrett hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Ramsey's expression darkened. "My sister was taken by men like Buchanan 3 years ago, never found her." He looked away briefly. "I couldn't save her, but I can help you." Garrett took his hand, her decision made. Moments later, they were riding double on Ramsey's stallion, leaving Sweetwater Creek behind. Garrett's arm circled Ramsey's waist, her face pressed against his back to shield it from the cold night air. For the first time in weeks, she felt something akin to safety. "My ranch is a few hours' ride," Ramsey said over his shoulder. "You'll be safe there." As they rode under the vast canopy of stars, Garrett's exhaustion finally claimed her, and she drifted into sleep, her grip on Ramsey never loosening. She woke to gentle hands lifting her from the horse. Dawn was breaking, painting the landscape in hues of gold and rose. Before them stood a sprawling ranch house, its windows glowing with welcoming lamplight. "We're home," Ramsey said softly, setting her on her feet. The door opened, and an older woman with silver-streaked hair hurried down the porch steps. "Ramsey, you were supposed to be back yesterday." "I was worried sick." "Sorry, Ma," Ramsey said, steadying Garrett with a hand at her elbow. "Had some unexpected business in town. This is Miss Garrett Larson. She'll be staying with us for a while." The woman's eyes widened slightly at Garrett's disheveled appearance, but her face quickly softened. "Of course. Come in, dear. You look like you could use a hot meal and a bath." Inside, the ranch house was warm and inviting, with handcrafted furniture and colorful quilts. Ramsey's mother, who introduced herself as Alina Northwood, showed Garrett to a small bedroom and provided a clean dress and toiletries. "It's not much," Alina apologized, "but it should fit well enough until we can get you something better." After washing away the grime of her ordeal, Garrett joined the Northwoods for breakfast. Besides Ramsey and Alina, there was an older man with Ramsey's eyes, his father, Robert, and a young woman named Sarah, introduced as the housekeeper. "Miss Larson," Robert Northwood said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "my son tells me you're in some trouble." Garrett looked down at her plate. "I don't want to bring danger to your home, Mr. Northwood." "Nonsense," Alina interjected. Ramsey explained the situation. "Those men have no claim on you, but they believe they do," Garrett said quietly, "and I have nowhere else to go." Robert exchanged glances with his son. "Well, we're always short-handed around here. Can you ride?" "Yes, sir. I grew up on a small farm in Kansas." "Good. You can help with the horses and around the house until you decide what's next." And just like that, Garrett found herself with a temporary home and purpose. Over the following weeks, she settled into life at the Double N. The ranch was indeed impressive: 3,000 acres of prime grazing land, hundreds of cattle, and 24 employees including cowhands and household staff. Garrett worked hard, determined to earn her keep. She helped Alina with cooking and mending, assisted Sarah with household chores, and found she had a knack for working with the horses. The ranch's head wrangler, an old Mexican cowboy named Miguel, grudgingly admitted she had a natural touch with the animals. Ramsey she rarely saw. He was often gone before dawn, returning after dark, managing the endless tasks of running the ranch. When their paths did cross, he was unfailingly polite but distant, as though their shared secret from that night in Sweetwater Creek was a burden he preferred not to acknowledge. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Garrett was in the stables brushing down a new mare when Ramsey found her. He leaned against the stall door, watching her work. "You've settled in well," he observed. Garrett nodded, not looking up from her task. "Your parents have been kind. They like you." A pause. "We all do." Something in his tone made her glance up. Their eyes met, and that same electric understanding from the night they met passed between them. "I should be moving on soon," Garrett said, though the thought of leaving the Double N and Ramsey filled her with unexpected sadness. "Where would you go?" She had no answer. Her family in Kansas was gone, their farm lost to drought and debt 3 years earlier. She'd been working as a seamstress in Santa Fe when her employer died, leaving her without references or prospects. "I don't know," she admitted finally, "but I can't impose on your family forever." Ramsey stepped into the stall, close enough that she could smell the leather and sun on him. "You're not imposing. You work harder than anyone here. It's the least I can do after you saved me." He shook his head. "Don't think of it that way. What happened in Sweetwater Creek, no one should endure that." "Yet many women do," Garrett said softly. "I was lucky." Ramsey's expression darkened. It wasn't luck, it was right. They were standing very close now, the mare forgotten as she gazed up at him. For a moment Garrett thought he might touch her, but then hoofbeats outside broke the spell. "Riders coming," someone called. Ramsey's hand moved to his gun, his entire demeanor shifting. "Stay here," he told Garrett, then strode out to meet the approaching visitors. From the stable doorway, Garrett watched as 3 men rode into the yard. Her blood froze when she recognized Buchanan among them. "Northwood." Buchanan called, dismounting. "We need to talk." Ramsey stood on the porch, his father beside him, both men with hands resting casually near their weapons. "State your business," Ramsey replied coolly. "You've got something that belongs to me," Buchanan said, his gaze scanning the ranch house windows. "Red-haired woman. Paid good money for her." "There's no property of yours here," Robert Northwood stated, "just family and employees." Buchanan sneered. "That whore ain't either." "She's a runaway I purchased fair and square." Ramsey's voice cut like steel. "Watch your mouth, Buchanan. There are ladies present." I got witnesses to the sale, Buchanan persisted. Sheriff in Sweetwater Creek says I'm within my rights to reclaim my property. A person isn't property, Ramsey said. And no sale is valid if it's against the will of the person being sold. Several ranch hands had appeared, strategically positioning themselves around the yard. Buchanan and his men were now outnumbered 5-1. "This ain't over, Northwood," Buchanan spat. "That girl cost me customers and reputation. I want compensation or I'll be back with the law." "You do that," Ramsey replied evenly. "Meanwhile, I suggest you leave my land before I have you escorted off." After a tense moment, Buchanan and his men remounted and rode away, but not before Buchanan shouted, "I know she's here. You can't hide her forever." That night over dinner, the mood was somber. "He'll be back," Robert said grimly, "possibly with the Sweetwater sheriff. Man's been bought and paid for by saloon owners and brothel keepers for years." "What can we do?" Alina asked, her concerned gaze moving to Garrett. "I should go," Garrett said. "This is my problem, not yours." "Absolutely not," Ramsey declared. "If you leave, Buchanan will find you." "Then what?" Garrett looked around at the family that had taken her in, feeling both grateful and guilty for the trouble she'd brought to their door. Robert stroked his chin thoughtfully. "We need to establish that Garrett is legally protected. If she were married, for instance, she'd be under her husband's protection by law. No claim Buchanan makes would stand." Alina brightened. "The Miller boy has been sweet on Sarah for months. Perhaps he'd know," Ramsey interrupted. His voice was quiet but firm. "I'll do it." All eyes turned to him. "Son," Robert began. "That's not necessary." "It is," Ramsey insisted. He looked directly at Garrett. "If you're agreeable, Miss Larson." Garrett's heart hammered in her chest. "You would marry me, just to protect me from Buchanan." "Not just for that," Ramsey said, a flush creeping up his neck. "I've grown to admire you these past weeks. Your strength, your kindness with the animals, the way you fit into life here." He cleared his throat. "It wouldn't have to be a real marriage, just on paper for your protection." Alina and Robert exchanged knowing glances. "I'll need to think about it," Garrett said finally, though part of her wanted to accept immediately. The thought of being Ramsey's wife, even in name only, stirred feelings she'd been trying to ignore since their first meeting. That night, Garrett couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, watching the moonlight bathe the ranch in silver. Marriage to Ramsey would solve her immediate problem, but what about his future? He deserved a wife who came to him without complications, without dangerous men hunting her. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Opening the door, she found Ramsey standing there, looking as sleepless as she felt. "Walk with me," he asked. They strolled in silence to the corral where horses moved like ghosts in the moonlight. Ramsey leaned against the fence, his profile strong and thoughtful. "I want you to know," he said finally, "that my offer wasn't just about Buchanan, though I'd do anything to keep you safe from him." Garrett stood beside him, close but not touching. "Why then?" He turned to face her. "Because I can't imagine this place without you anymore. Because when I ride home after a long day, I find myself looking forward to seeing you, even if it's just across the dinner table." He smiled ruefully. "Because I think I started falling for you the moment you whispered to me in that stable." Garrett's heart swelled. "I've been fighting my feelings for you since that night," she admitted. "But your family has done so much for me already, I can't ask for more." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Ramsey took her hand, his touch sending warmth up her arm. "It wouldn't have to be in name only, Garrett. Not if you didn't want it to be." Their eyes met, and Garrett saw in his the same longing she felt. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Ramsey lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and Garrett answered by rising on her toes to press more firmly against him. When they parted, both were breathless. Ramsey's arms had encircled her waist, and Garrett's hands rested on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll marry you, Ramsey Northwood." His smile was radiant in the moonlight. "Tomorrow," he promised. "I'll ride for the preacher at first light," but Buchanan's threat materialized sooner than expected. The next morning, as Ramsey was saddling his horse, riders approached the sheriff from Sweetwater Creek among them. "Ramsey Northwood," the sheriff called, his hand resting on his gun. "I have a complaint against you for harboring a runaway and theft of property." The Northwood family gathered on the porch, Garrett standing protectively between Alina and Robert. Ramsey walked calmly to meet the lawman. "Sheriff Willis," he said, nodding politely. "What property am I accused of stealing?" Willis jerked his head toward Garrett. "That woman belongs to Buchanan by right of purchase. $2 paid in front of witnesses at the Golden Nugget Saloon." "That woman," Ramsey replied evenly, "is my fiancée, Miss Garrett Larson. She's been living and working here with my family's blessing while we prepare for our wedding." The sheriff looked surprised. Buchanan didn't mention any engagement. "Buchanan attempted to force Miss Larson into prostitution against her will," Ramsey stated. "She escaped and sought sanctuary with me, her betrothed. Any sale was conducted under duress and is therefore invalid." Willis seemed uncertain now. "You two were engaged before she came here. We met in Santa Fe last year," Ramsey lied smoothly. "When her employer died, she wrote to me and I invited her to the Double N." "That true, miss?" Willis called to Garrett. Garrett stepped forward, her hand finding Ramsey's. "Yes, Sheriff. Ramsey and I have been planning our life together for months." She held his gaze, infusing her voice with all the genuine emotion she felt. "I love him more than anything." The sheriff removed his hat, scratching his head. "Well, this complicates things." Buchanan seemed mighty sure of himself. "Buchanan is a liar and a trafficker in human misery," Ramsey said coldly. "And if he continues to harass my future wife or my family, he'll answer to me personally." The threat wasn't subtle, and the sheriff recognized it for what it was. After a moment's consideration, he replaced his hat. "I'll tell Buchanan there's been a misunderstanding," he said. "But you'd best make this engagement official soon, Northwood. Man like Buchanan doesn't give up easily." "We intend to," Ramsey assured him. "In fact, I was just heading to fetch the preacher when you arrived." After the sheriff departed, the family gathered in the parlor to discuss this new development. "We should move the wedding forward," Robert suggested. "Today, if possible." Alina nodded. "I'll prepare the house. Sarah can help me gather flowers from the garden." "Are you sure about this?" Garrett asked Ramsey when they were alone. "Marrying in haste because of Buchanan's threats." Ramsey took her hands in his. "I'm not marrying you because of Buchanan. I'm marrying you because I want to spend my life with you." His blue eyes were earnest. "But if you want to wait, we will." Garrett shook her head. "No more waiting. I want to be your wife, Ramsey Northwood, today and always." By sunset, Garrett stood in Alina's wedding dress, hastily altered but beautiful with its delicate lace collar, facing Ramsey before the fireplace in the Northwood parlor. The preacher, a kind-faced man from the nearest town, led them through their vows as ranch hands and neighboring families looked on. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Ramsey's kiss was tender but filled with promise, sending butterflies through Garrett's stomach. The cheers and applause faded as they looked into each other's eyes, their shared journey just beginning. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed an army. Garrett moved through it all in a happy daze, scarcely believing that morning's danger had transformed into evening's joy. Near midnight, Ramsey led her away from the festivities to the small cabin he'd prepared at the edge of the ranch property. Inside, lanterns cast a warm glow over simple but comfortable furnishings. "It's not much," Ramsey said, suddenly shy, "but I've been working on it whenever I could. Thought we might want some privacy to start our life together." Garrett turned in a slow circle, taking in the details: curtains that matched her eyes, a handmade quilt on the bed, fresh wildflowers in a jar on the table. "It's perfect," she whispered. They stood gazing at each other, the reality of their marriage settling around them like a warm cloak. Ramsey stepped closer, his hands gentle as they framed her face. "I know this happened fast," he said softly. "If you need time," Garrett silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her newfound feelings into it. "I don't need time," she murmured against his lips. "I just need you." Their first night together was a tender exploration, each touch a discovery, each whispered endearment a promise. Garrett had never imagined such happiness could exist, especially after the darkness of Sweetwater Creek. In Ramsey's arms, she found not just passion but acceptance, not just desire but respect. As dawn broke, they lay entwined, watching light filter through the cabin windows. "No regrets?" Ramsey asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "None," Garrett assured him. "Though I do worry about Buchanan. Will he truly give up?" Ramsey's expression hardened. "If he doesn't, he'll regret it. But don't worry about him now. You're my wife, protected by law and by me." "And I'll protect you too," Garrett said, surprising herself with the fierceness in her voice. "We're partners now, equals." Ramsey smiled, pulling her closer. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Life settled into a new pattern in the weeks that followed. Garrett continued working with the horses, but now rode alongside Ramsey during cattle drives and helped manage the ranch books, revealing an education that surprised everyone. "My father believed daughters should be as capable as sons," she explained when Ramsey commented on her mathematical skill. "He taught me everything he knew about farming, finances, and survival." "Smart man," Ramsey said appreciatively. "I'm beginning to think I got the better end of our bargain." Their happiness was unmarred until a sweltering August afternoon when Garrett was alone at the cabin, working on mending. The sound of approaching riders drew her to the window. 3 men, none of whom she recognized, were dismounting. "Mrs. Northwood," one called. "Message from your husband. There's trouble with the herd. He needs you to come quick." Something in the man's voice raised Garrett's suspicions. Ramsey had ridden north that morning to check on cattle grazing in the high pasture. He would have sent one of their regular hands if he needed her. "I'll be right out," she called, quickly retrieving the revolver Ramsey had insisted she learn to use. She tucked it into the pocket of her skirt before stepping onto the porch. The men's expressions changed when they saw her, not the concern of ranch hands delivering an urgent message, but the calculating look of predators. "Where's Mr. Northwood?" she asked, her hand in her pocket. "Like we said, madam, trouble with the herd." The speaker stepped forward. "We're to escort you to him." "Strange," Garrett replied coolly. "I don't recognize any of you as double-N hands." The men exchanged glances. "New hires," one muttered. "I see." Garrett's fingers closed around the revolver. "And did my husband mention where exactly this trouble is located?" "North pasture," the first man said too quickly. "Curious," Garrett remarked, "since my husband specifically told me he was checking the East Ridge today." The pretense dropped instantly. The lead man lunged toward her, but Garrett was faster. She drew the revolver and fired a warning shot into the air. "Next one goes through whoever takes another step," she declared, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Now, who sent you?" "Buchanan." The men froze, clearly not expecting armed resistance from a woman. "Lady, you're making a mistake," the leader growled. "Put that gun down before you hurt yourself." "I think not," Garrett replied, backing toward the cabin door. "My husband taught me to shoot, and I'm quite good at it." "Now answer my question." Before any of them could respond, hoofbeats thundered from the direction of the main house. Ramsey appeared, rifle raised, with 3 ranch hands behind him. "Problem here, Mrs. Northwood," he called, his tone conversational but his eyes hard as flint. Relief flooded Garrett, but she kept her gun trained on the intruders. "These men claimed you sent for me, something about trouble with the herd." Ramsey's expression darkened as he dismounted, keeping his rifle ready. "Did they now?" He approached the men slowly. "Last chance, who sent you?" The leader spat on the ground. "You know damn well who. Buchanan wants what's his." "Nothing here belongs to Buchanan," Ramsey stated coldly. "Especially not my wife. He paid for her fair and square. Says the marriage is just a trick to keep his property." Garrett's grip on the revolver tightened. "I am not property, I never was." "Tell that to Buchanan," the man sneered. "He's offering $50 for anyone who brings you back." "And I'll put a bullet in anyone who tries," Ramsey promised. The standoff might have continued, but the sound of more riders approaching drew everyone's attention. To Garrett's horror, Buchanan himself appeared, flanked by at least a dozen armed men. "Northwood," Buchanan bellowed, reining in his horse. "This ends today." Ramsey positioned himself protectively in front of Garrett. "You're trespassing, Buchanan. Take your men and leave, or there'll be consequences." Buchanan laughed. "You're outnumbered, boy. I'm taking what's mine, and then I'm burning this place to the ground for the trouble you've caused me." What happened next unfolded with dizzying speed. Buchanan drew his gun, aiming not at Ramsey but at Garrett. Ramsey shoved her aside as the shot rang out, taking the bullet in his shoulder. He staggered but remained standing, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Buchanan toppled from his saddle. Chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded from all directions as Buchanan's men and the double N hands exchanged shots. Garrett dragged the wounded Ramsey into the cabin, where she quickly barricaded the door and began examining his injury. "Not deep," Ramsey gasped as she tore his shirt away from the wound. "Went straight through." Garrett worked quickly to stop the bleeding, her heart pounding in her ears. Outside, the gunfire was intensifying. "I need to help them," Ramsey insisted, trying to rise. "You need to stay alive," Garrett countered, pushing him back. "For me." A bullet shattered the cabin window, sending glass spraying across the floor. Garrett grabbed Ramsey's rifle, moving to the window to return fire. She took careful aim at one of Buchanan's men who was advancing on the cabin and squeezed the trigger. The man fell. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Ramsey asked weakly. "Told you," Garrett replied, reloading. "My father taught me everything." The firefight seemed to last forever, but gradually the shots from Buchanan's side diminished. Finally, Robert Northwood's voice called out, "Ramsey, Garrett. Are you all right in there?" Garrett helped Ramsey to his feet, and together they emerged from the cabin. The yard was littered with bodies, most of them Buchanan's men. Buchanan himself lay motionless where he had fallen. The remaining attackers had either fled or been captured by the double N hands. "It's over," Robert said, approaching his son. "Sheriff's on his way. Real sheriff from the county seat, not that Sweetwater Creek crook." Alina rushed to examine Ramsey's wound, tears streaming down her face. "You could have been killed," she scolded, even as she hugged him carefully. "Had something worth fighting for," Ramsey replied, his eyes finding Garrett's. The aftermath of what became known as the Double N shootout rippled through the territory. The county sheriff conducted a thorough investigation, concluding that the Northwoods had acted in self-defense against armed trespassers. Buchanan's sordid business dealings came to light, and his brothel was shut down. The women there offered assistance and legitimate employment opportunities. As for Garrett and Ramsey, the bullet wound healed cleanly, leaving only a scar to remind them of how close they had come to losing each other. Their love, tested by fire, emerged stronger. 1 year later, Garrett stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching Ramsey return from a day's work with the cattle. Her hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly, where their first child grew. As Ramsey dismounted and strode toward her, his face lighting up at the sight of her, Garrett reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. "How are my two favorite people?" Ramsey asked, placing his hand beside hers on her stomach. "We're perfect," Garrett replied, leaning into his embrace. "Just waiting for you to come home." Ramsey's kiss was tender, filled with the love that had only deepened with time. "I've been thinking," he said, "if it's a girl, we should name her Alina after Ma. And if it's a boy?" Garrett asked. Ramsey smiled. "How about Garrett? Carry on your father's tradition of unusual names." Garrett laughed, a sound of pure joy that rang across the ranch that was now truly her home. From sold for $2 to worth a whole ranch and a namesake, not bad for a girl from Kansas. "You were always worth more than this whole territory," Ramsey said seriously. "I'm just the lucky fool who gets to love you." As the sun set over the Double N Ranch, painting the sky in the same crimson hues that had greeted Garrett when she first rode into Sweetwater Creek 2 years earlier, she offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the desperate whisper in a stable that had changed her life, for the cowboy who had valued her beyond measure, and for the love that had transformed them both. In the distance, a new herd of cattle grazed on land that now stretched as far as the eye could see. The Double N had prospered under their joint management, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. But its true wealth, Garrett knew, was measured not in acres or cattle, but in the love that filled every corner of their lives. "Worth a whole ranch," she murmured, echoing Ramsey's words from that fateful night. "Worth everything," Ramsey corrected softly, leading his wife into their home as stars began to appear in the vast western sky.